RMC is supported by MonsterJoysticks.com. Level up your retro gaming with their joysticks featuring genuine Sanwa arcade parts. And OneClickPrint.com for your photos on canvas, acrylic, gifts and more. Local craftsmen and global delivery.
Hello cave dwellers, welcome to the cave for part 2 of our exploration of the Mattel Aquarius. In part 1 you'll recall, if you've seen it, if you haven't, click the link up here. In part 1 we diagnosed a problem with it. It was a fairly straightforward problem, so we focused a bit more on the history of the machine and what an interesting history it is, which we'll continue today, where we'll find out how successful or unsuccessful the machine was and what happened to it next. However, we got it working. And it still does look like a 40-year-old machine, despite working perfectly. It's yellowed, it's dirty, it needs some TLC, so we'll get the rubber gloves on and we'll clean that up today. What we'll also do is check out all of the other things that came with it when I bought it, including the data recorder and the printer. I'd love to see if that printer still works. And I genuinely haven't even opened these boxes yet, so hopefully there's more than a house brick in each of them. So let's get them open. Let's see if these need cleaning and retrobriting as well, and let's get the whole thing looking as well as operating like new and find out more about the story of the Aquarius. So as we said in part 1, the machine itself here is quite yellowed in places. The plastics themselves, the texture, the width of the plastic, just the overall feel of it reminds me very much of a Nintendo Game Boy, I have to say, which is something we successfully retrobrited recently. But you never quite know how the different machines' plastics are going to react, and the last thing that you want is marbling if you retrobrite it. So we'll play it cautiously and hopefully we'll get a good result with this. One thing I haven't been able to source yet is replacement keys or a replacement keyboard to deal with the lettering that's rubbed off. I think all we can do at this point is a little bit of IPA and a brush just to clean the keys off, and nothing too abrasive that might make the situation even worse. And quite handily, in amongst all this bundle was an original Aquarius program catalogue, which is really nice. In fact, there's an Aquarius 2 on the front as well as the Aquarius 1, which we'll come on to a little bit later in the series. But looking inside, we can get a measure for just how white it should have been originally, so a lot whiter than this yellowing. And also I really like the styling on the accessories. We've got the data recorder, which we have here, and the printer, and the lines continue on these. It's a design style that's been purposefully chosen, similar then to the stylings of the data recorder that you would get, for example, with the Commodore 64. The design followed through from the machine, unlike a ZX Spectrum where you just buy any third-party cassette recorder. In my case, a W.H. Smith's branded one from the high street, and it worked fine, but there was no continuation of the style, which was a shame actually, because I'd love to have seen a Rick Dickinson designed cassette recorder to go with the ZX Spectrum and follow that design. Anyway, I'm getting distracted. Back to the Aquarius. And one accessory here that's listed is the Aquarius floppy disk drive, and it reads, "The Aquarius home computer system is designed to grow neatly and effectively. During 1984, both single and dual floppy disk drives, STAR, will be introduced. Used together with the Aquarius disk drive controller, STAR, they provide high-speed, high-capacity data storage. With these, gain access to the popular CP/M disk operating system, STAR." Each product sold separately. Well, I can tell you that none of those products came about for the Aquarius, and again, we'll talk about that a bit later. A disk drive of sorts, or an accessory with the word disk drive, did appear, but it wasn't a disk drive in the traditional sense. So again, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But there are no more accessories listed, so the only thing that we're missing is the mini expander and the uprated printer. And the rest in the catalogue is a list of software titles, including, and I have to say I'm still enjoying it a great deal, Dungeons and Dragons. Great little game, that. Also with our Aquarius, we got a few cassette tapes. We've got 3 original cassette tapes. So here we've got Games Pack 1. Oh, that's going to be a compilation of games. Let's see if it tells us what they are. Stalactites, Macho Man, Othello, and Mutants. There we go, so 4 games on that one. But the other ones seem a little bit more interesting because on the front of the other ones we've got Pack Mister, no prizes for guessing what that is, but it says Aquarius and 16K extension. So there are perhaps some improvements in this game with the 16K expansion. Oh, it's falling up. Maybe we can play it with and without the expansion pack in and see if it works. And Aliens, again, with support for the 16K extension. So hopefully these tapes work and hopefully our tape drive works. And then there's a bunch of blank tapes which aren't labelled. Clyde Audio Products. Got a Philips tape there and what's that? A TDK. Maybe there's something on them. We'll have a little explore. And if none of those take your fancy, then included with the pack were 2 basic programming books. We've got 30 dynamic games for the Aquarius by Tim Hartnell and the Aquarius program book by Pt2. And I did start typing one of these in when that original screen problem came up. So I never quite got to finishing typing it, but there's some pretty short programs in there that we can try out. So I think we should do some basic programming today for as long as we can with that fleshy, spongy keyboard. Right, let's open these boxes and see what we've got inside. We'll start with the data recorder, which is described in the catalogue as a handy and economical way to store programs and important data on audio cassettes. I think it's taped there. We'll open it on the other side. And there it is. And our data recorder is indeed quite dirty and yellowed in places. So it would be good to strip this down and clean it up. But if we put it next to the Aquarius itself over here, it's kind of odd that the lines follow through as a continuation from the machine, because if you put it next to it, it's quite a lot higher than the original machine. Makes it quite a wide machine, but hey, we've seen the Amstrad CPC 464. This is by no means wide compared to that. But the strange thing is, whenever you see this in the catalogues, in fact, you can even see it on the box here, they always display the cassette recorder behind the computer for some reason. Maybe it was just because of the width of their camera lens or something, but they always display it like that, which is bizarre, because you'd have your monitor there. Who puts their cassette player there? It's a really strange thing to do, but there you go. Obviously, the photographer wasn't a computer user. But hey, it's a nice looking machine. The branding continues on. We've got a data light and a power light, and it does look quite dirty on the inside, so this will need a good clean up. The data recorder then goes on the pile of things that we need to clean up, because I think that will look great if it's smartened up and working next to the machine. Let's check out the printer now. So this is a 40-column thermal printer. I'm very pleased to see that we've actually got a roll of thermal paper in there, so we can actually play with this. What it effectively does is it just dumps whatever's on the screen to the printer. We've got a paper feed button, a power button, and that's it. Inside, it's clearly been used because there's an old roll in there. So we can pop our paper in there, but that's it. We can't access any other part of it. I can see it's dirty, I can see it's dusty, so we will pop the lid off and at least spray out the dust before we test it. There is a caution to say we must only use Aquarius thermal paper. So no third-party brands in here. We might void the warranty. On the back, there's a little switch. Let me show you. We've got graphics, mixed or text modes. So we can see what difference that makes. And then just the connector to connect it up to the computer. It's a really simple device, and simplicity seems to be something that runs through all of these peripherals and this computer in general. In fact, it even says it on the front of the box. Truly simple, right on the front of the box. And they really have carried through that ethos, I think, on the face of it. Whether it's simple to use all of these peripherals, I don't know. We'll find out shortly. But yeah, that's the printer, guys. I'm looking forward to trying it out. We can combine that with some basic programming. We'll pop our basic programming from one of these books, maybe the Aquarius program book, hit print, see what happens. Will we get a puff of smoke, or will we get a beautiful printout of our basic program? So should we test first or should we clean first? I think we should probably clean it all up first and make sure it's okay. So we'll take all of this over to the lab, we'll give it a clean up, and while I'm preparing that, let's have a history lesson on the next chapter of the Aquarius. After its initial launch, what happened next?
Our Aquarius then launched in June 1983 in the US and appeared here in the UK the following month in July. The reception was frosty, as you've probably already guessed. Criticism was aimed at its build quality in both Your Computer and Personal Computing Today magazines, and Microsoft Basic was also criticised. This wasn't an extended version of Microsoft Basic, but the bare minimal implementation, and that didn't even include a command to clear the screen. Instead, you'd have to use this command. There were also no commands to control colour on the screen, so the user would either need to peek and poke the system's memory to get the desired effect, or disregard BASIC and work with machine code, and that was a far cry from the truly simple slogan on the box. The competition among low-cost micros here in the UK, however, was fierce, so its price was quickly adjusted from $160 in the US to under £60 for the machine in the UK. It was then a further £30 for the mini expander. Despite these competitive cuts, it would still cost more than the ZX Spectrum once you've added the expander and the RAM, and it didn't have the advantage of the huge software library the Sinclair machine had on its side. Over in the US, it was the cheaper VIC-20 and the TI-99 machines which buyers would opt for instead in this price bracket. It took just 6 months for Mattel to throw in the towel, first dropping the Aquarius and later the Intellivision too would fall. More than 600 employees were laid off in the electronics division, which would then be shut down. That wasn't the end of the Aquarius story, however. Mattel handed it back to manufacturer Radofin, who would make a go at selling it themselves with similarly unsuccessful results. But Radofin gave it a good go. They announced Prototype 2, the chess machine, would be launched in January 1984 as the Aquarius 2. That's 7 months after the first machine, giving potential buyers even less reason to buy the soon-to-be superseded device. There was even talk of an Aquarius 3, which was a little more than ambitious for a machine that quickly gained the reputation as one to avoid. We'll hear the final chapter of that story shortly, but first let's get back to our Aquarius, which we repaired and now we need to clean up. The computer printer and tape deck could all use a bit of scrubbing and some basic maintenance. So let's start by opening them all up and we'll see what we're dealing with. The machine appears to have come from a smoke and pet-free home, which is nice. Everything's really tidy, as you can see inside the printer here, which I think I'll give nothing more than a good clean with some isopropyl alcohol and a little bit of fresh grease. Out of all the items, the printer case is the whitest of them all. The computer, however, I would like to retrobrite, and that means stripping it down so I can work on the plastics alone, and that is easier said than done. This was a really cheaply built machine. Once inside the machine, I wanted to remove the power cable and so pop the cables out of the connector so I could feed them out the back of the case, but that black snap-locking grommet at the back didn't want to come out, and I didn't want to risk breaking brittle old plastics by forcing it, so instead I taped them up while I worked on it. On the top half of the case I removed the keyboard, which is held in with several dollops of hot glue. Precision engineering this is not, and I had to carefully cut the keyboard free. And you may have spotted all over the case are plastic rivets which are holding the metal system tray and various other metal parts in place. These are a real pain, we can't remove them, they'll just snap right off of the case. Instead, I have to bend this part free to reveal the keyboard membrane and then carefully remove that to get to our keys. And if you thought those keys didn't look dirty from the outside, then this may change your mind. That's as far as I can really strip the computer down owing to those plastic rivets, so let's carefully give it all a clean. The cassette player gets a quick brush down, and I got a surprise when I checked the rubber belts in here. The top belt spins the tape counter, an important component when we're lining up our compilation tape to load the right game, and as soon as I touched the belt, it just disintegrated. So I carefully removed it, and I'm pleased I didn't turn this on to test it because that would have made a huge mess.
just look at what happens when I press it onto a paper towel. What should be a rubber band is little more than tar. Its properties have completely changed from rubber band to sticky mess, so we'll have to replace that. The buttons on the tape player are noticeably yellowed, so we'll want to remove all of those for cleaning, and we can achieve that by sliding out this metal bar and carefully popping each button out. Another example of the super cheap build quality here is the rubber stoppers on the door. To dampen the shock of the door opening and stressing the plastic, some rubber bands have been hastily added. It works, but it's not exactly a refined approach to the problem. Underneath, the drive belt is a different story. It seems to have maintained its elasticity, there are no cracks, and it doesn't look stretched, so I think this should be okay. We'll test it out as is. So we'll pop the new rubber belt in on the top side, and then it's all ready to be cleaned. Over to the printer now, which I gave a clean down with some IPA, and I gave the rollers a clean as well. These get dry to the point where they no longer feed the paper roll, if not maintained, so hopefully a little clean will help with that. I also checked the grease and it didn't look too bad at all, but I went ahead and removed some of the excess old grease and put some fresh white grease in there. With that basic maintenance done, it was time for a wash down, which I did as carefully as I could considering I couldn't fully deconstruct the case. I know you guys love a cleaning montage, so brace yourselves, it's time for some scrubbing. There's always a balance to be had between stripping items down completely and being able to put them back together, and in the case of something as cheaply built as this, I didn't want to tempt fate, and it wasn't really necessary to get them as clean as I wanted. They were already pretty clean on the inside, so with a little elbow grease and some antibacterial spray cleaner and then some alcohol afterwards, they really came up well. All of the stubborn marks and residue wiped away nicely. The keyboard membrane then got a very delicate wipe down with IPA. These things can turn to dust very easily if you don't handle them carefully. And with that, all our parts are now clean and shiny. That printer has come up especially well. I don't think that needs any further work whatsoever. The tape deck is a little yellow around the sides and of course on the buttons, and then the computer has a definite yellow look, so those items we will retrobrite.
The weather was shockingly bad while I was restoring this. I waited for over a week for the sun to come out, and as soon as it did, I rushed out and very haphazardly slushed peroxide cream all over the machine and wrapped cling film around it and Miss RMC's pink garden table. I didn't know how much sun we'd have before it vanished again, so for best results we needed to visit Gizmo and touch her lucky retrobriting foot, like so. Help? Someone?
So there is the final result. I think that's as good as we're going to get this old machine looking. We've got rid of the yellowing from the retrobriting. I think that looks great. It's all a consistent colour. I'm really pleased that we got rid of the yellow on these buttons on the data set there, because that looked really nasty. So it all looks really, really good. Does it work? Well, I'm not going to keep you waiting till part 3, but I can tell you 2 out of the 3 items work. We have some problems with the printer. You can see here some gobbledygook coming out of it, so it does kind of work. I'm not sure that I'll get to the bottom of that, but I'll demonstrate what does and doesn't work in part 3 with you, where we'll take this for a full test drive. We'll try out all of these tapes, some of them unlabeled, so we could find some interesting things on there, and I'll just give you my experience of getting to know and using the Aquarius. We'll also type in some of the typing listings from the book over there, and no doubt you'll watch me get very frustrated with the keyboard. So I hope you'll join me in part 3. Until then, here is a clip of Pack Mister. No, it's not a clip of Pack Mister because it's loaded and the game doesn't want to start. How odd. But the reset button works, so the keyboard's fine. It appears we've got lots more to discover in part 3. Can we play Pack Mister? All the anticipation is too much. I'm sure you can't wait. I'll see you then. Until then, take care and thank you for watching.